I wanted to share before anything else. It is such a pleasure and a privilege to be out here today. As has been noted, I have been a part of this movement for a long time, and I guess that makes me old guard, but I know for sure it makes me old. And part of that is being at a community for 40 years. I became the leader of the original Vineyard Church on the west side, and led that until about 18, 20 months ago, and we went through a succession. So you can imagine after all of that time, my wife and I were kind of in this position of, wow, we're going to kind of allow them to kind of go on and lead. And so what are we going to be doing on Sunday? Well, we decided that let's go and visit a different church across the west side, which is kind of a wide area, Santa Monica, Culver City, Venice, all of that. Just one time each week. So we went through about 20 churches. And I can tell you this, that it was profound for us. Profound. From week one all the way through, we found ourselves every week saying, I needed that. Like we just realized how much we needed communal worship. Because, life just kind of has all of this that flows through us and is telling us this and that and infecting us and influencing us. And we realized I needed to center myself. I needed to recenter myself in the great truth, put my soul before God. And we both left every week feeling that. And we also found that in many ways, by going to different and a variety of churches, it was very Vineyard because John Wimber, the founder kind of the larger movement, was always known for saying that he loved the whole church, the whole church. And he lived that out in profound ways. And so it was in some ways being very Vineyard to go and just find ourselves through all the diverse communities. But at the same time, I have found that when we are at a Vineyard church, when I'm here with you, there's something so familiar, something so much in which our unique family story is reflected here. The way that we talk, the way we think about certain things. And that's the truth with any family. We all have, there's something about a family that you kind of come to feel like this is us, And, every family has its weird uncle and its kind of, crazy cousin and all those things. But they also have those stories that just help them know this is how we understand ourselves. And that is such the gift of being and connecting here at the Vineyard. What I want to invite you to join me with today is to step back to something a lot more profound than merely that kind of family story. And that is to the ultimate story of humanity. Because that is precisely what Jesus comes to engage. What we find is that Jesus is coming to say that we have not had the story so right. We get so many things that get corrupted about the way we even understand our existence, to use that big term, our very existence. Who are we? And what is it that the creator of ourselves, the very source of life, is wanting to us to know? That grand story. So I want to invite us to engage a story that Jesus tells, because when he tells stories, that's in a way what he's doing is saying, this is your true story. We're going to come to one in just a moment, but I want us to not miss the context of it, because he doesn't just tell stories. He often tells stories in response to something. Like they're kind of getting it wrong. He's going, let me tell you a story, in response to that. So we read, and we're going to come to that parable in what we know as the Gospel of Luke chapter 15. But at the very start, we read these words where it says, now the tax collectors and sinners were all gathering around to hear Jesus. They're all gathering, moving around him. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, these are the two groups of religious leaders, muttered, this man welcomes sinners and eats with them. What is going on? Well, as some of you are aware, that they are doing what I think we do more often than we'd like to admit, which is they're thinking that the real story of humankind, like if we want to work out what we need to do, we need to what? Figure out who the good people and the bad people are, and pretty much, divide the world between them. That's what they've done. They had their terms for it. These are bad people. These are good people. We're part of the good people. Jesus comes. He is doing things that the public saw and they did see, which is he's speaking with an authority, they said, unlike any other. He speaks, they said, as one from God. And he's acting with power that only could come directly from heaven. So they are drawn to, wow, except here's the problem. He's joined up and is kind of hanging out with what? The bad people. They're the good people. So why is he kind of messing with this idea, this paradigm? And I think we all do well to take that in for just a moment, because I really think that we just have 1,000 versions of the same thing. There's religious versions, there's secular versions, but we really do think that we can somehow, the real story is dividing the world up between the good and the bad. And I will tell you, Jesus won't join the story because it is not the true story. So Jesus comes to that and he begins to say, you need to understand things a little differently. And it's from that he begins to tell 3 quick parables. Actually 2 quick and 1 long. The first 2, and they all share something in common, is the shepherd who's lost a sheep, and he goes out and finds the one lost sheep and brings him home. And everybody's rejoicing that one sheep has been found and what? Brought back to its proper space and place. It's back home. And then the woman who loses a coin, and finally she finds it, and everybody rejoices because now it's in its proper what? Place. It's back where it belongs. That's the essence. But now Jesus does something. He gives one more, and this time, and it's really different in the way that he expands the storyline. He's like, okay, now I'm going to tell you your story. I'm really going to tell you the story with more detail. The essence of it is still the same. It is about that which was lost being found, and the celebration at the heart of it that you and I need to hear, because it is the essence of the story that defines our lives. But let's hear the storyline, and my invitation to you and I is, as we hear this, to listen to it as perhaps the long-lost story of our lives. To listen and see if we can't identify. So I'm going to read through the story and just let you and invite you in your own mind to just open your own heart to what you hear. Begins in verse 11, where it says, Jesus continued after telling the 2 previous ones. There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger one said to his father, Father, give me my share of the estate. So he divided his property between them. Not long after that, the younger son got together all he had, and he set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth in wild living. After he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in that whole country, and he began to be in need. So he went and he hired himself out to a citizen of that country, who sent him to his fields to what? To feed pigs. He longed to fill his own stomach with the pods that the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. When he came to his senses, he said, how many of my father's hired men have food to spare, and here I am starving to death? I will set out and go back to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired men. So he got up and he went to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion for him. He ran to his son, threw his arms around him, and kissed him. The son said to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, quick, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. For he was lost and is found. So they began to celebrate. Then he adds, meanwhile, the older son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. Your brother's come, he replied, and your father has killed the fatted calf because he has him back safe and sound. The older brother became angry and refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you actually are always with me, and everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." With that, I truly believe that Jesus wants us to hear that this is the story that we are all a part of. And it's going to have differences in terms of culture, in terms of nuances, in terms of levels of drama. But in ways, it is the story that we all do well to really hear and really understand about what is taking place when Jesus has come into this world as the eternal Son to meet us. And he wants us to grasp some things. And so he begins with that line, "There was a man who had 2 sons." The story is rooted in a father and his son. And clearly Jesus was describing how they should understand the very nature of God. For Jesus understood in ways no one else could just how much the Father, the God, the Creator, the source of all of our existence, is actually like a father. For he lives in that kind of relationship in which it could be spoken of as Father, Son, and Spirit. And so he knows that kinds of the bonds, the love, the mutuality, the way we are intended to have known it, for we too were created in his image. And so he's speaking to that. And he is speaking to the fact that there was a son, there was a father, there was a man, a father who had 2 sons. And in those words, we need to hear that we are not mere chemical compounds that just have this elusive idea that we're persons. No, we are persons because we come from a personal entity. We are truly persons. We truly have meaning. It says there was a man who had 2 sons. They were what? They were his own. They were not unrelated. They were not unwanted. They were not unconnected. They were his own. That is who you and I are. We are daughters and sons of God. And if you've ever wondered, like, am I actually loved? Am I actually wanted? That is the essence of this story. We cannot take that in deeply enough. You are wanted deeply. Jesus is saying a father had 2 sons. That is how he looks upon you. But now Jesus describes what has led to the state that we find ourselves in, because the truth is we find ourselves wanting to believe about that, but there's also this sense of, but something is off. I feel this separation from God. And it's so true, and Jesus is trying to help us understand that. So he begins to describe that very story. Because the truth is, we all find ourselves in some way, if we're honest, looking for that Father, looking for that sense of source in which we're so rooted that we don't have to earn it. We just are it. The it about who we really are. We're all searching for that connection. When I had kids at a very young age, I would sometimes have to travel abroad, and it was always hard. I remember one time I made a few extra passport photos when I had to do some passport photos, and I left one under the pillow of each of my children. And when I called home at one point and I asked my wife how things were going, she said, "Oh, it's good, but it's very sweet and sad how our little 22-month-old daughter at the time had that little photo and was walking around the house saying, 'Dada,' looking for me, looking to see if she could find me." And I think in ways, all of us are doing that. Far more sophisticated forms of it, far more, I guess we'd say proud ways of doing it. But we're all, in some way or another, trying to find that which can truly give us our worth. That's the position we find ourselves. There's this separation, this position that we're in. And so Jesus describes these two sons, and he begins describing that in the youngest son first. And the younger son, and the way he asks, and many of you are familiar with this story, that when he says, I want my share of the inheritance, there's something profoundly offensive in what's taking place. It isn't like today, because the younger son would not be the one who had the first right. The oldest, firstborn, does. So the younger son to demand it was one thing, but more than that, you don't receive your inheritance until the father dies. So what he's really saying is, you know what? I want all the stuff, and then I want you out of my life. I want the goods, but not the giver of the goods. I don't want your governance. I don't want to live under your house. I just want your stuff. That's rather profound. But does it sound a little bit familiar too? Like maybe the way we all kind of love the stuff of the world, but we're not really as given to the governance of the one who gives it. We don't necessarily want to live in that home, but we love the stuff. In many ways, I think that is at the root of our story, that we are God's children. But the truth is, the second point is this: we declare our independence, wanting creation without the Creator, demanding the goods without the governance. In other words, what he's describing is this defiant independence. That's the best way I could describe it. And what I think is so important for you and I to hear in this is he's really describing what it means to be sinners. He's really saying the problem, the issue that has separated us is this defiant independence. This is what the Son did. Because so many times I think we hear the word sinner, and whether it's in your past or current, or maybe you're even now just exploring God, and you hear that and you think, I don't know, when I'm told that I'm a sinner, it's like I feel a little offended by it. I take a little offense to the fact that I think we're pretty much just, I'm a good person who's made a few mistakes, sure. I mean, I'll accept that. But calling me a sinner feels like it's just a little bit unfair, a little bit like, judgmental. But see, Jesus isn't describing here that idea. He's saying the issue is not that we broke a rule, it's that we broke relationship. You and I need to understand that our story is not one of simply breaking rules, but of breaking relationship. We have fundamentally said something to the effect of, I want to run my own life. I want to be the one who rules my life. I want to have and rule over my own sense of kingdom. What is a kingdom? It's whatever space that is kind of yours to rule, and you want to rule over it. And so when God's kingdom, when his ultimate rule is coming, we're kind of like, don't infringe on mine. And if we're honest, we all know there's something of that. There is this tension, there's this separation. That is the essence of what's going on here. And so the people hear this and go like, oh my, this is quite something. This is when the son is going to get it. Because in that ancient culture, for the son to have done what he just did, this is when he will be facing the consequences. He will be considered, at the very least, dead to the father, if not dead himself, if not killed. That would be the only real question. Is he going to kill him or just make him as if he's dead to him? And then comes the most profound line of all, I think, in the whole story, that's often missed for what it implies. At this point, they're saying, okay, the father's going to either, have him beaten, senseless, maybe killed, but certainly he will be gone. And it says what? He gave him his property and let him go. That is what was the real shocker to the first hearers of this story. He did what? He let him go. He let him go. That's really profound. And I think it is really helpful for us, because I think it helps us to understand that the way we think about freedom has been very deceptive. We tend to have this idea through life, especially through those individuating years when we're like teenagers, like 12 to 22, in that range. But it runs all the way through life. And it is this, that, you know what, I need to find my freedom, right? I need to find my freedom. I need to be able to do what I want to do, because I've been living under, rules and what have you. And I don't want to be controlled by anybody. That's kind of this natural thing that runs through us. And so we come and think of, whether we're thinking of it or not, it's what we do with God. We all, in some way or another, at least at some point, have largely said, I kind of want control of things. And we think we have to fight for it. So we spend a lot of years fighting for control. But here's the great truth. We've always had it. God has already said, I've given you control. I've given you that freedom. You have the very freedom you're fighting for. See, he gave the Son the freedom to go. I'm not going to control you. You have freedom. And the truth is, the very freedom we have should scare the hell out of us. We think we're fighting for something that will be our great doing, that we'll find ourselves. The truth is, we have a freedom to be separated from the source of our lives, and that should scare the hell out of us, because it means that we can find ourselves lost forever. That's the essence of the story. He let him go. And while they're all appalled at it, Jesus is saying that's actually the dynamic of the story, the dynamic of where you find yourself, is that you can walk away. But then things begin to go hard. In verse 13, the younger son got together all he had, set off for a distant country, and there squandered his wealth. He finds himself in a distant country. I think the truth of the matter is we all can find ourselves in a distant country. It's not merely a geographical location. It's all kept vague. Why? Because it really means we've gone somewhere that is foreign. It is not where we're naturally meant to be. And that's where he finds himself, in that kind of space. The son thought that in his freedom he could find himself, but the truth is he's now actually lost. And the next point is this, that we become lost forging a false identity in a foreign place. In other words, at that place where we go, we are now trying, because we've left our true identity, we are now trying to do what? We're trying to find ourselves, and we're going to find it in anything we have. So we get a picture of what? The son begins to use what he has. I got my inheritance. I got some goods. And people will maybe be affirming of me. Maybe they'll give me a place. Maybe they'll give me value. They'll give me love. And so he uses it up doing that. And the truth is, I think if we're honest, we all take the goods of life and somehow we try to use them to kind of vainly try to find value, try to find affirmation, try to find our identity. It might be our looks, it might be our wealth, it might be our intellect. We will use any of those to kind of try to say, look, and validate me here. I have value, and that's what he does until what? Until he realizes they're kind of used up. They can no longer meet, and he comes into a place of that famine. He's wasted his time trying to do what he'll never be able to find. And we waste our life, the next point, seeking what can no longer be found. The truth is, we can spend so much of our lives in this idea, and we all have more or less of it, which is, hey, I need to be my own person. I don't want anyone to control me. I need to be my own person. I get that. I think there's a healthy part of trying to navigate our identity and what have you. But have you ever thought about the fact that whenever we say, man, I'm just my own person, if anyone dared ask you the next question, really, who is that? You wouldn't have a clue how to answer it. We don't. We'd start mumbling about some very vague ideas. Honestly. Like we don't really know who we are within ourselves. We can't name ourselves. And we don't really get served well by others naming us. We just can't be our own person. And when we try to do our own thing, we often then become our own thing. And it's not the thing that we really are. Let me just say that again. When we try to do our own thing and we think that's the end all, that somehow will make me my own person, we end up becoming something that we're not. And that's what Jesus is saying is so tragic here. The younger son then finds himself what? Finds himself having lost all the dignity he once had. He's now out and he's feeding pigs. Now imagine, as you're familiar, that Jewish culture, pigs were deemed unclean. So he's now feeding these animals deemed unclean that would never be touched. Now he's feeding them and realizes what? They actually have it better than him. They actually have more than what he has in the way of being provided for. That is the ultimate sense of loss, of shame, of vanity. And so, goes on in verse 14, it says, after he had spent everything, there was a severe famine in the whole country, and he began to be in need. And what we come to is this place in which we see this ultimate loss, that we face the emptiness of loss and of dignity until we come to, and here's the most central line perhaps in the whole thing. It says that when he came to his senses, that was the beginning moment. When he came to his senses, he began to realize this. There's a moment in every one of our lives. It might not even be a moment. It might come in a few fleeting thoughts in a day like today, built upon, where we begin to kind of come to our senses and say, something's not right. What is it that makes really sense? What do I sense deep inside of me about really who I am and what God is trying to come and call me into? Well, he comes to his senses, and what does he realize? He realizes that he's lost everything, but he realizes that he had everything. He realizes that, oh my goodness, in the heart and home of my father, I had everything. And so he realizes that he needs to go home. And he realizes that he, of course, cannot easily go home because he's kind of already thrown that away. So he has this kind of conflicted place where he's thinking, okay, well, I can't be a son. I'll just try to go home and to be a servant. And that's where the next point comes, that hope begins with coming to our senses, realizing the good that we long for but no longer deserve. There's a shift that takes place in us, and I think it's the healthiest way we can go through it is to realize we go from the demanding, which the son originally was, right? Demanding everything. I want my just due. To becoming one was like, no, I'm undeserving. There's the shift. From the demanding to the undeserving. That is where he begins to go. You see, there's this profound sense in which, in this story, that son was saying, I don't deserve to be, and I realize it now, I don't deserve to be a son, a child of God. But in so doing, in that very realization, he realizes what? That he had that dignity to lose in the first place. See, most of us don't even realize we have that dignity. But when he realizes, oh my God, I had that to lose and I've lost it. In a sense, he's finding something. When he comes and realizes, my gosh, the pig is eating better than I. But he also realizes, but I'm not a pig, I'm a person. I'm a person. That begins a sense of awakening. It's the difference between why he doesn't just go off and die and why he chooses to live. Because he's saying, wait, there is something there. And what does he choose to do? He chooses to say, you know what? I'm going to make my way back. And I'm going to go to him, and he's kind of worked out the speech. He's really good at it, right? He's kind of got it all down. Okay, I got to get it. And he makes his way back. And what we find is the next point here, that God as our Father will welcome us with mercy and restore us. As we see the son returning, you can almost imagine that whole process of returning. And it's part of every one of our stories. There is a part in which we return, we come home. And this is the picture of it. And here is what's so striking is the father runs to him. Something else that anyone familiar with the ancient cultures would say a father would never do. A father's kind of sense of their role was to stay there while what? People came to them. They didn't go running off towards anybody. People came before them out of respect. The father has no sense of this vain respect. God has no care for some kind of vain, capricious element like the other so-called gods. No, God, it says, runs to him. And it is so striking. He is not ashamed to be his father. And let me just say it. In this story, Jesus wants you to hear it. God is not ashamed to be your father, the source of your life. He is not. And so many of us don't believe it. We just don't. We think, I don't know. Like, he must feel really sad about me. But the truth is, what does the father do? It says he gathers up the whole household. Go! In fact, the son does try to give the speech, right? He cuts him right off, right in the middle of it. Did you notice that? Father, I can only come as one. The father's like, you know what? You can't come back as a servant because you're not a servant. You're not a hired hand. You are a son. That's who you fundamentally are. And so here it comes. He gathers everybody, and here he bestows those things upon him. And he says to him, what? It's time to celebrate. And so go get the sandals, because servants went barefoot. Only the children would be those who wore sandals. So he says, give him and restore to him that dignity. And he's in filthy clothes. He's carrying a lot of shame. We all know that. So he says, go and put a fresh robe on him that I provide. Why? Because we all know that we are all dressed in ways that bears a certain amount of shame. But he's saying that, you know what? When we receive Christ's relationship to the Father, all of his rightness, we're all now living with that rightness in our relationship with the Father. It's bestowed upon us. He's taken and given us that position. So wow, we get to live in that kind of a relationship, that beautiful union of the Father and the Son that's eternal and will never end. Yes, that is that robe. And go and get the ring that one would use to kind of sign documents and wax as a signet. And it's like, yeah, that authority, that's restored to you, that rightful place that a human life was meant to know as one who bears the image of God. It's a restoration of that full dignity as a human life, as one who bears the image of God. And he says in all of this that they celebrate. The central theme of all three of these stories is the way that there's a celebration, that everyone comes together to celebrate everyone, the one coin, the one sheep, and the one son. And that is something you and I need to take in. Like really take in. Like a lot of us are like, I guess I could imagine that maybe, but most of us aren't. Most of us, honestly, in this room, we think like, yeah, I guess God will accept me, but it's kind of like in the group plan. Like, I guess I qualify in this group plan. Like I'm people who go to church or people who claim to be Christian or people who have accepted Jesus. They all do that. I'm sure that I just get in because I'm part of that group. But it's not like God really personally wants me. Wrong. The whole story is centered in one that was as undeserving as any and was what? Celebrated. You are not accepted by God. You are celebrated by God. Take that in. That makes us feel really uncomfortable, but God celebrates you. It's what he's telling through the whole story, because it's what the religious leaders completely missed. They saw something that just felt wrong. And so do we. We feel it about ourselves. We feel it about other people. He's saying you're completely missing it. Every time that one comes home, all of the heavens celebrate. Just on the one, on the individual. And so it is. But the story is not over. It's helped us to understand one part of us, that rebellious part. And to understand that part of our nature, But let me quickly, and I'll do it in a shorter fashion, note the fact that there is that second son. And now in the older brother, what is he describing? Well, in the younger brother, he's describing those sinners that were at the table. Like, you need to understand, yes, they've gone off and they've done their things, and you know they've been living this way, but they're coming to me, and you need to see what's happening and why it's good. But let me tell you about the older brother, because he is you. He is you, the religious leader. He is you as the one who what? Is saying, did you catch it? Says what? All my life, I've been doing such a good job. All my life, I have obeyed you. Little bit of an exaggeration, but that's kind of what we do when we think of our own morality, isn't it? We're kind of like, oh, I mean, come on. Like, all my life, I am so good. I mean, next to perfect. I know there's a few things, but I'm next to perfect. And so what's he saying? I am deserving. He basically says, I deserve what you're giving to him. And that doesn't make sense to me. I'm offended by it. Not fair. Now, you need to think about that for a little bit, because we all can do that in ways. And again, this is a corrective as well, because it corrects this idea that we have in the way that we tend to think that what we really want and the way that we should think about life is we want what we deserve, right? And bad people deserve bad consequences. Good people deserve good consequences. There's the fundamental problem with the entire story. What do we really mean when we say that we just want what we deserve? We usually mean that we want God to get rid of evil, bring consequences for evil. All evil? Oh, I don't know. Maybe not quite all evil, because, well, that might run through me. How about we draw a line right around myself? Everything more evil than that, I want you to fix. That's what we really mean. It is. We don't really want what we deserve. We are defiantly independent. We've refused the grace of God. We're not as great as we think. And we don't know what to do with that. The only hope we have, grace. That God would wait, God would be patient, God would suffer until we come home, till we come in the house, till we get over our whole deserving self thing. Does this older son do that? He leaves that as a question, doesn't he? The son is left where? Outside. Does the father care about him? Oh, he cares about him. Did you notice that the older son is not only also outside of the home that the youngers come into, but that the father also went out to him. Did you get that? It says the father went out to him. So there's the father again. He didn't just say, where's that older son? Oh, gosh, I reject him. No, he went after him. He pleaded with him. And he said to him basically what? There's always been grace for you. I've always wanted you home. But you are choosing to live outside of that. Because if you listen to all the teaching of Jesus, I got news. He basically says, if you refuse grace for people as a whole, you refuse it for yourself, and you will never be able to truly enter into the life of coming home. We need to grasp that. The ultimate entire storyline here was all about this. And I think this is God's heart for us this morning. That all of heaven has one thing that it would invite us to more than any other. I can't, at this stage in my life, sum it up any better than this. Come home. Come home. When I look back upon my life and all the vanity in it, and the vanity that still runs through it, I'm just more deeply convinced than ever that that's God's heart. He wants us to come home. And in coming home, to realize this, that I will never be found anywhere other than in the heart and the home of God, my Creator. That's the only place I'm found. I cannot be fully found in my wife, my kids, my role as a pastor, my role as a parent, my wealth, my anything. I cannot be found in that. I will not find my true identity in it. I want to be found and can only be found in him. Let's pray. And just invite us to sit for a moment before that invitation of Jesus to come home. And I'll let you, as much as you might share this sense of the truth of all that Jesus is saying, you can, in your own heart, follow me with this simple prayer. Father, we recognize that we are never home until we come home to you. That we have been, defiantly independent. We have in many ways tried to kind of just rule our lives, and that we are in many ways, whenever separated from your love, we are lost to who we truly are. And we give ourselves to lesser things that that only ultimately lead us to feeling defiled, undignified. Forgive us that we have used your goods to actually sell ourselves to others. Would you welcome us home as your daughters, your sons? We just take a moment now, just even receive for the first time or afresh your blessing. Your full blessing. We hear and receive that celebration that eternity has sought for, that we were always created to know our place with you. Father, fill our hearts, we pray, in Jesus' name.